Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything: geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you live from New York City, your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Porkins Policy Radio. As always, I am your host, Pierce Redmond, and you can find this show here at American Freedom Radio, AmericanFreedomRadio.com, as well as on my website, which is PorkinsPolicyReview.com. And if you are new to the show, there are lots of ways to listen. Of course, you can follow me through RSS, on YouTube, I'm on iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Of course, everything is archived at AmericanFreedomRadio.com if all else fails. Also, on Fridays from 10 to 12, I'm replayed on Awake and People's Internet Radio, a whole bunch of other stations, as well as Ed Opperman's Spreaker channel. And on Saturdays from 6 to 8 Mountain Time on KYAH 540 AM, you can also hear me played. Quickly, I want to thank David for recently signing up to Patreon. Thank you so much, David. And thank you for signing up at the $5 level, which, of course, means that you, David, get to suggest and vote on topics for me to cover on the show. So please do let me know if anyone out there has any topic suggestions if you're at the $5 level. And I will be releasing the bonus podcast for this month. Again, this is sort of becoming like a ritual, is to release them, like on the very last day of the month. But it's still technically the podcast for that month. So I'll probably have that out hopefully by Thursday morning. And we're going to be talking about Cambridge Analytica. And maybe we'll mention that a little bit later on today's show, because we are joined by our very good friend and frequent guest, Tom Secker, to do our sort of mid-season Homeland review. Tom and I promised to, kind of cover when we were about halfway through, which we are at this point. There doesn't seem to be like this sort of week off that Homeland usually does, so we just decided to kind of do it right now. But Tom Secker, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Pierce. Thanks for having me back, and I'm looking forward to talking about Homeland again. Like we said in our first episode a few weeks back, we said this season's looking like a cracking season, both from an entertainment and a kind of political analysis perspective, and it's continued like that. I mean, I've had friends tell me they think this is the best one ever. I'm not sure I don't know. It's not my favorite. My favorite is season 4 in Pakistan and Afghanistan, but it may be the best. It's certainly got an awful lot going on that's very interesting, very provocative stuff in there. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I feel like I always forget, but because I assume everybody out there knows you. But of course, you can find all of Tom's work by going to spyculture.com. Of course, Tom is the host of Clandestine. Tom also has a Patreon. You can go and support Tom by going to patreon.com/Tom Secker. But let's get into a lot has happened since we did a review of just episode 1. Of course, I mean, I guess I always feel like I assume everyone's up to date, but if people that don't know, Tom and I, after every episode, we're emailing each other incessantly talking about it. So I feel like we've already kind of been covering everything, but quite a lot has happened. I guess we should just sort of give a brief sort of little overview. But the situation with Brett O'Keefe, that sort of is almost like the first sort of, arc of the season. But I think last time we left off, O'Keefe was, he had made it to this family's farmhouse that was sort of, kind of a militia prepper type family. And they take O'Keefe in and they're protecting him and he's broadcasting from there. This, of course, leads to a standoff eventually Saul is released from prison, and he becomes President Keene's national security advisor, and we'll definitely talk about that a little bit later. And he's tasked with bringing in O'Keefe. He travels to where is like Virginia or West Virginia? I can't remember now off the top of my head exactly where it is.
I think so. Yeah.
And he travels there, confronts O'Keefe. You know, they kind of have a back and forth. There's a tense moment where they almost try to abduct Saul, and then he's let go. O'Keefe is really kind of an interesting character because we, again, see the sort of behind the curtain that he doesn't know what he's doing. You know, he's never fired a gun, we find out. He's actually kind of quite intimidated and thinks that most of the guys around him are actually kind of nutty and insane. His girlfriend / producer is terrified of being there. She wants to get out of this. And there is a Ruby Ridge sort of Waco style siege. And I actually thought that this was handled fairly well. You know, or a pretty balanced for Homeland, where it is sort of a mixture of both sides that sort of lead to pretty horrific results. There's we see the introduction of fake news is during this arc. There's a fake news story that one of the young boys, again, straight out of Ruby Ridge, there is the father of, you know, this sort of, I don't know, militia group. His son is walking his dog out on the property, and federal agents shoot the dog, then they shoot him. He's wounded. One of the FBI agents is taken hostage. And then a fake news story circulates that the son is dead in a hospital, which then results in this FBI agent being brutally executed. And then all hell kind of breaks loose. Lots of people end up dying, being killed. And O'Keefe is eventually, taken into captivity. And we haven't really seen much of O'Keefe, which I hope, doesn't remain that way. I hope that O'Keefe does return a little bit later because he's so wonderful. But Tom, quickly, what did you think of this sort of story arc? Because it seems as if once the raid kind of happens, that story is sort of put aside, and we're introduced into what I assume is the real kind of thrust behind this season, which is Russian active measures, which is a term that gets thrown around quite a bit in this. It's a favorite term of people like Brian Whitmore at RFERL, the Power Vertical podcast. He's always talking about Russian active measures and fake news, and there is a large, conspiracy of Russian intelligence agents all over. They're trying to bring down the president, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But what did you make of the Ruby Ridge storyline? Because I actually enjoyed it quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's probably the best thing about this season so far. It's more interesting than Carrie's arc, which is starting to become a little familiar. But, they're kind of replaying season 1. Anyway, we'll get to that. I thought it was great. O'Keefe remains one of the best characters Homeland has ever had. I desperately hope they're going to bring him back. I'm really, really hoping at some point him and Dara Dahl break out of prison together and go on the run.
Where is Dar?
Who knows? I can only assume they're going to bring him back because they can't get rid of Dara Dahl. He is the best character ever in Homeland. So yeah. I mean, I'm hoping those two team up somewhere along the line and have an adventure together because that's just what should happen.
Maybe they get their own spin-off series.
I'd watch that.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Hell, I'd watch O'Keefe's show.
Oh, yeah.
If that actor actually did a Brett O'Keefe show, I'd probably watch it because it's hilarious.
Oh, yeah, I think I said that, was it last season? I was like, they should do little, 10-minute clips of his show, that should, make like a YouTube channel of O'Keefe's show. That would be amazing.
No, it would. Because the actor is a very fine actor. He's utterly believable in both his the mask that he puts on as Brett O'Keefe on the Brett O'Keefe show, and in the real man that he is, the guy who is completely out of his depth. He doesn't really know how to handle weapons. When the whole kind of raid goes down, when, like you say, all hell breaks loose, he doesn't know how to react.
No.
He's the one who's been sat there saying, this is going to bring about civil war. And then as soon as he gets a little moment of that, a little taste of that, he's lost at sea. The consequences of all of his flim-flam and, nonsense is finally coming home to roost in a very real way right around him. And he's got nothing.
Yeah.
He's incapable of controlling the situation. Because when Saul finds out about the fake news about the kid supposedly being left to bleed to death in the hospital, he phones up O'Keefe and he tells him this. But O'Keefe at that point doesn't have any power because the whole thing has snowballed and it's got beyond one guy spouting off a bunch of nonsense and inflammatory rhetoric and all the rest of it, and it's now got very, very real. And I felt they handled that extremely well because they are both simultaneously suggesting O'Keefe is somewhat responsible for what happened. Almost everyone there is somewhat responsible for what happened.
Sure.
But that this is one of the problems with that kind of media, is that you get a situation riled up, it gets out of your control, because even if you're the authority that's told people to do this, when you then turn around and say, don't do this, well, you've got them riled up, so they don't listen to you anymore. I thought they handled all of that. They crafted that kind of thematic exploration of that kind of media and its effects and consequences very, very well. And they portrayed the FBI, including the FBI guy from The Sopranos, which...
yeah.
I mean, he's very good at playing an FBI guy, don't get me wrong. He also turns up in season 2 of Billions, where he's equally very good, but not as an FBI character. The FBI kind of looked like a bunch of, incompetent, out of their depth, don't really know how to handle the situation, kind of... There's words I can't use because you've told me not to swear. But you know what I'm saying. The typical gun-toting...
and Homeland definitely never portrays the FBI as all that competent or...
certainly not in this series.
Capable, yeah. But that is kind of true to a large extent.
They're not very good at handling these sorts of situations. I mean, Tom Clancy said this. I remember him making a joke about it in that video of him talking at the NSA, where he said, he once got to go and see the FBI's hostage rescue team. They're like, super SWAT team or whatever. And they're supposed to be, the kind of sensible, careful approach to that kind of situation. And he said, well, if there's a sensible or careful approach, I can only assume that the reckless approach is to use nukes. And it's like, well, yeah, they do kind of just crash in there, shoot everything that's moving, drag O'Keefe out in a cloud of tear gas. It's not a great moment for them. And I thought all of that, they name drop Waco and Ruby Ridge throughout the course of this. And there has recently been the Uni-bomber series. There's recently been the Waco series, which is considerably more hard-hitting than this, to be honest. You said this is fairly balanced, and I think it is pretty well balanced. It's
at
not
least for Homeland.
Well, and I think in general, you can't approach these sorts of incidents and solely say, oh, this is a massive government screw-up. Certainly, Waco and Ruby Ridge absolutely were massive government screw-ups. Don't get me wrong. But to ignore context, to ignore what led up to this, what is surrounding this, that actually makes these sorts of events more likely. I'm not saying that means you have to blame the people at Ruby Ridge, the family there, or you have to blame the Branch Davidians. I'm just saying there's more to it than just pointing the finger at the government and then feeling satisfied with yourself. So I think Homeland, relatively well balanced in terms of reality. Waco, frankly, that series came down very much on the side of the Branch Davidians. And one might make the argument quite rightly. I'm just saying, I found it very interesting that we've recently had this series where Ted Kaczynski was portrayed very sympathetically. You had this other series where the Branch Davidians were being portrayed very sympathetically. And now you have Homeland, not quite as sympathetically, but nonetheless, the government don't come out of that situation looking at all good. It's just like you said, all hell breaks loose. And this is what happens. And you got to wonder, where's the negotiation? Where's the attempt to resolve this peacefully? Because in so many of these kinds of scenarios, and this really is where the government kind of consistently keeps doing the wrong thing, negotiation is abandoned far too quickly in favor of intimidation tactics and psychological warfare and so on. And that, again, just like O'Keefe does on the other side, that inflames the situation. So it's like, you've got all these different idiots on both sides all pouring petrol on this fire, and sooner or later the thing's going to go up. So I thought all of that fascinating politically, and I'm not really sure why it is that we're getting this string of TV shows not just referencing those events in the early 90s, and with Kaczynski obviously in the 80s and 70s as well. But it is a curious trend. Like enough time has passed that they can now actually make something that portrays those people sympathetically, and particularly with Kaczynski, because he was kind of nuts. And he did unequivocally do lots of pretty horrible things. So, we're at a curious point in American history, and I do wonder, just to kind of try and wrap this up, because I know I've been rambling a bit, are these television shows themselves a form of provocation? Are they, whether deliberately or otherwise, making something like that, a Waco, a Ruby Ridge, whatever, more likely in the present by portraying these events in such a way that makes anyone who feels victimized by the government feel quite angry about it? It very much portrays, the horrific violence that the state is capable of, and thus, by implication, that we should meet that violence with violence. So I do, as much as I'm interested by this recent trend in television, I am a bit concerned as to what the kind of psychological, political implication of that is.
Well, just when you were kind of talking there, looking at it from the perspective of Homeland and the people that are obviously involved in that, it's interesting that, as you said, the FBI are kind of portrayed as these sort of, they give up on negotiations. And who wants to negotiate? Saul, who is not CIA at this point, but he is, for the most part, he is our representation of the CIA along with Kerry. And it's interesting that he's more interested in negotiations. And furthermore, it's funny that the FBI, I understand it. Their agent is executed. They're gonna kind of freak out. You know what I mean? It's like if you shoot a cop in New York City, every cop on the in every borough is going to be after you, and they're going to want justice and retribution. That's how these law enforcement people work. It's funny though that you were just mentioning your favorite season, and I would agree with you, is the fourth season where they're in Pakistan. And what happens there? Well, Dar Adal negotiates with Haqqani, and everything is fine. Again, this arch enemy of the CIA, they're willing to negotiate with him. Yet the FBI is unwilling to negotiate with, people that are maybe a little, out there, a little, they're certainly right wing. They're certainly, kind of terrifying, and they've got, this arsenal of guns and, water and generators and all this stuff. But, what the larger threat that they pose is fairly limited, as opposed to, say, someone like Haqqani, who's, part of this international network of terrorists. I mean, Haqqani, they siege the embassy in that season, yet the CIA is still willing to negotiate with them. So I don't know. I wonder if there isn't a bit of that at play with this. Again, the CIA are kind of the good guys. They're kind of the responsible adults in the room that are willing to compromise or at least make tough decisions, in order to benefit, the safety and security of the American people, which is always, the kind of lie that they use in order to justify all sorts of horrible things that they do. So I don't know. That's sort of an interesting little.
Well, let me just jump in on that one, because I mean you're absolutely right that it is kind of curious, the contrast between those two seasons, in as much as, I mean, like you say, this kind of militia family, I guess. I mean, it's more than a family. There's a bunch of other guys that show up at one point. But in any case, okay, they are a little bit odd. But as far as I can tell, they're not really doing anything illegal. Like you say, they're not really posing a threat. The only way those people turn into a threat is if someone like O'Keefe goes around provoking them, or if the government turn up and try and intimidate them and thus provoke them. So, left to their own devices, chances are they're not going to be a problem. They might do some things that me and you might not particularly like, but like I say, if it's not illegal and they're not posing a threat, then what does it matter? So, yeah.
Well, very much like the Weaver family in Ruby Ridge. I mean, I don't really agree with what, the sort of racialist political theories that Randy Weaver posed, but, they essentially, he wanted to just be left alone. And of course, it was an FBI informant that, pleaded with him and convinced him to, sell him a sawed-off shotgun so that then the ATF and FBI could go
and the probable cause to go and
murder his family. Yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, like you were saying, they didn't really pose a threat to anybody.
Whereas Haqqani, to be fair, Haqqani successfully kidnapped Saul. This lot didn't. He kidnapped him and took him off to his mountain lair and forced him to watch him having sex with his wife and all sorts of stuff.
Oh, right.
In what has to be the most awkward Homeland scene ever. And then Saul escapes magnificently and runs off into the desert.
Right.
See, that's why I love season 4 so much, is because it's got stuff like that in it. So, and Haqqani storms the embassy. Him and his armed, Taliban gang or whoever they are, they storm and shoot up the embassy. And I guess that's why they have to negotiate with him, because he's too clever to not negotiate with. That's the problem. If you're just some rural militia, the government can kind of come and flatten you because you aren't part of a wider political or religious or whatever ideological movement, or usually not. You're not, like you say, because they don't actually pose a threat, or not a significant one in any meaningful sense. There's no great problem with just wiping them out. That's not going to come back and haunt you in that many ways. And so far in this season hasn't. I mean, I can only assume at some point it's got to, but it seems like you say that they've sort of almost swept that under the rug and everyone's just accepted that this has happened and moved on. So maybe they're actually saying something very real there, that negotiation is for those people who are smart enough to actually hit you where it hurts. And if you aren't that smart and that well organized, they won't have many compunctions about just wiping you out, whether that be by drone or, dickhead FBI squad. Doesn't make a huge amount of difference, does it?
No.
So, very interesting stuff.
No, absolutely. And again, this sort of plot line or this story arc kind of culminates with we see this mysterious character who enters the hospital where the militia guy, Elkins is his last name. So Elkins' son is in this hospital. Saul negotiates his release, just to bring him to a hospital. And this mysterious guy, who we find out a little bit later on in the next couple of episodes, is the sort of master Russian fake news operative. This guy, Yevgeny Gromov is his name. And he, apparently he's, he's like a fairly high up Russian intelligence operative, but he goes around and creates fake news himself. He doesn't have anybody to help him do this, in this small town. But he takes his photo and he sort of starts this sort of the next story arc, which seems to be very much the kind of real thrust of this season. We find out that David Wellington has this mysterious lover, Simone Martin, who's this beautiful French woman who works for this NGO called the International Democracy Foundation, which we also find out is just a Russian front. You know, and I mean, again, it's just sort of rich, some of the dialogue about this. You know, they just sort of, you know, as if there aren't American NGOs with names as, you know, stupid.
National Endowment for Democracy? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's one. You know, I mean, you can, any of them.
I can only assume that's where they got it from. That's kind of what they're doing, is they're just taking that and flipping it in reverse and saying, well, what if the Russians have this sort of dubious front foundation or organization that's just a, you know, an intelligence operation, essentially. And maybe they do, but we know the CIA do. Absolutely. And have done for a long time. So.
And just, you know, if there's any people that are doubt, I mean, the National Endowment for Democracy is admitted to be a CIA front. I mean, that's, you know, always has been. And it's, you know, there's a famous quote, from one of the guys who was running the NED at one point. He basically stated that, you know, the NED can do what the CIA can't do, and that's why it's so beneficial. You know, so I'm paraphrasing. But again, I mean, he admitted, and that was like to like the New York Times or something like that. I mean, they're very open about this. But of course, you know, it's really all these Russian NGOs that are subverting democracy everywhere. You know, anyway, that sort of kind of takes over. We find out that Simone is part of this cabal of Russian operatives, that she's setting up David Wellington. We find out that Simone received payments. Presumably, these were payments for McClendon's assassination, or at least they're designed to look as if Simone was receiving these payments in exchange for helping to murder McClendon, and she then goes and is willing to testify in front of Paley's committee, saying that Wellington is the one that provided her with this $50,000. And the story gets a little bit complicated, and we'll kind of have to sort of gloss over some of this, but basically it becomes clearer and clearer that there's a very big active measures operation going on. And just to be clear, anyone that's sort of confused, active measures is like a Soviet term for political warfare. You know, and it's sort of like, it's sort of like if you combined, media manipulation and disinformation, propaganda, assassinations, political repression, sort of all together in one thing, then that's what active measures are. And it's this term that, you know, of course, you know, we here in America love to use it, and it sounds very mysterious and scary, and you know, there's all sorts of I don't know, you know, alleged active measures that have been going on. You know, there's what was the one? Jacob Siegel, who's like, he was like a Soviet doctor who, you know, he sort of was one of the advocates that HIV was created by the United States government. That is supposedly an active measure. You know, there's other things like that. Again, if you listen to Brian Whitmore, you know, he's constantly going on about active measures. And of course, the parallel being that the Trump campaign, hacking the election, we were just, you know, political assassinations, you know, Skripal, you know, these are all active measures. But anyway, we find out that this is like this sort of large plot. We are led to believe that Dante is, I don't know, SVR or some sort of intelligence operative. You know, and Saul kind of goes full-blown Russiagate. And, you know, I mean, he name drops Brexit as, you know, that was a Russian operation. He insinuates that the fake crucifixion story in, Slavyansk in Ukraine, which was a fake story that was put out or publicized by Russia's Channel 1. You know, and Saul kind of makes this overblown comment that this is what sparked the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is like not really true. You know, but again, that's sort of like Saul's like whenever he sort of talks about conspiracy things like 9/11, he gets this very like, well, this is what happened. This is it, Just one fake news story is why the evil Russians invaded Ukraine. It wasn't anything that we had to do with. But anyway, this sort of becomes this like larger and larger conspiracy. Carrie is kind of losing her grip on everything. She's now popping Adderall like Pez. She hires a bunch of her.
Doesn't she even snort some in one scene?
She might. I can't remember if that's this one or when she snorts the caffeine pills in Germany from last season. She might be snorting them in this. She doesn't swallow them. She chews the Adderall too, which is if you want to make it work faster, you can chew Adderall. And suddenly, that's what I was going to say. She hires these her CIA contractor friends, apparently. They start doing all sorts of things. They actually have now bugged Dante's house, or they go through his stuff. Tom, what do you make of this sort of shift? Because I do like it, and I kind of at times right now it seems like they're kind of reverting back to the old Homeland. Like, I really could care less about Franny. Like, I wish she didn't exist. To me, I know this is so cruel. I mean, it's just this little girl, but she's like a constant reminder of Brody, and I just want to forget Brody. And there's a lot of this, like Carrie and Franny leave because Carrie's out all night, doing operations and bugging Dante's house and whatnot. And I kind of want just more of this actual, what is the active measure story? And we do get to see Ivan or Ivan. He appears from who was in last season and meets up with a pretty brutal death. He's just put in a body bag and chucked in like a river. It's while he's still alive. But what do you make of this shift into Russiagate?
Well, firstly, of course, Dante has to be an FBI agent because the FBI are idiots. That's quite well established in this program. And in reality, of course. So that's all fine. I make a lot of different things out of this shift. I mean, the whole thing with Ivan from, not from last season, it's from season 5, when they're in Germany. And the Russians have penetrated the CIA embassy there, and they're running double agents and so on. They brought him back, and I said to you straight away, as soon as they brought him back, because they had all of this Skripal poisoning story in the media, I said they're going to kill him off in the next episode. They've just brought him back in order to kill him off, in order to reflect reality, when they must have written this episode 6 months ago, before anyone knew that this was going to happen, or at least as far as we know, anyone knew this was going to happen. And I was right, and I'm not just saying that to kind of, boast, but it's because it was kind of obvious. As soon as I saw that character, I thought, they're going to kill him. He's going to be dead. There's just no way, given what the current news story is talking about. This is Homeland. I mean, we've kind of learnt the MO by now. So I wasn't making a particularly original observation there, I think. But in any case, what to say about that? They brought back the Russian defector character just to kill him off because of this story about a Russian double agent being, someone trying to assassinate him. The whole active measures thing, I mean, this is what when I was watching this and just thinking back over, the last 10 years or so, how did we get to this point? This point where, I mean, it's quite a serious charge, that a foreign state hacked the US election or in some way profoundly influenced the US election. And I do wonder, you remember about maybe 8 years ago, around 2010 or something, we started to get a lot more stuff about cyber terrorism and a cyber 9/11 and all of that kind of stuff. That was the rhetoric that was going round at that point. And no one's explicitly made that parallel, as far as I'm aware, with the whole Russiagate hacking, whatever. Right. But that's effectively what they're talking about, right? They're saying this was almost a form of coup d'etat, like a black operation, like the sort of thing that, the CIA were doing in the 50s in Iran and Guatemala and whatever. Anywhere they liked, really. That's what, in effect, they're saying the Russian state did to the US. is that not, if we take the Russiagate charge literally, which I think we should, rather than just as a piece of rhetoric, that's what they're saying. So that is kind of a cyber 9/11, is it not? In some ways, it's bigger than 9/11, what's being alleged here. So to see Homeland reflecting and completely reinforcing all of this, and yet doing it in a slightly different way, because in reality, supposedly the Russians hacked the election in order to get Trump elected, right? They're pro the president and anti the security state. In Homeland, they're doing this to destabilize the president because for some reason they seem to hate the president. The accusation isn't that the Russians helped get her elected, it's that they're attacking the government now that she is elected. So they have inverted it in typical Homeland fashion to try and confuse and cover up what it is that they're actually doing. But what I think they're actually doing is playing into a set of assumptions, a whole mentality, a worldview, actually, it seems to have now grown into. I mean, in as much as there is a political consensus in the United States at the moment, at least outside of the Republican Party, it's this. I don't see very many people on the left, or certainly not in the kind of liberal centrist areas, who are skeptical about this, about Russiagate. So they're feeding into a consensus that has been, I don't know how deliberately, but has been building for a while with all of this, you know, the next attack is going to be some kind of gigantic hack. And of course they use the Hollywood version. Oh, they're going to hack the electrical grid and blow up a dam or something, blow up a nuclear power station. But ultimately, the most major hacking accusation of a decade where we've seen no end of everything being hacked by everybody is that they hacked the election, that they've completely undermined U.S. democracy somehow, as if it really existed. But, you know, that's a separate argument. So Homeland is very much reinforcing all of that. But to what end? Because I go back to that interview that Alex Ganser gave and that other interview that you sent me of, what's Carrie's real name? Claire Danes. Of Claire Danes on whatever, tonight.
Stephen Colbert, show. I think.
Yeah. And she said the same thing, that, you know, when they went and had these meetings before writing the season, the CIA were talking to them about, to some extent, being at war with their own White House, and that they were using journalists as part of this, again, to combat the anti-factual administration and the fake news and so on. But then you have to think, so what? Homeland is merely an extension of that? It is merely the cultural manifestation of that exact same operation that the producers of this show talked about? Because that's what it seems to be. So yeah, once again, they're carrying the CIA's water. Ultimately, like you say, we have to keep repeating this, but it's because it's important. The CIA are no longer in this series. They are represented symbolically, metaphorically, by Carrie and Saul. Those are the characters that matter as far as the CIA are concerned. And both of them completely buy into this notion of it's the Russians. So they're the ones telling us that. They're the ones trying to convince us of that. And I don't think that's in any way a coincidence.
No, not at all. I just wanted to add a little kind of real life parallels, because Homeland is so good at this. And I don't really know if this is quite, maybe this is a stretch. I'll throw it to you, Tom. But because I also want to get into this character, Yevgeny, who is the master of fake news. And there's a wonderful scene between him and Ivan or Ivan. I always want to call him Ivan, but he is Ivan. Anyway, there's a scene where, Ivan is supposed to be, a defector, but we find out that he is sort of still active, or, is soon to be activated in part of this large active measures operation that, is slowly being put into place. And he confronts Yevgeny, and there's this wonderful scene where they're talking, and he's like, "You're moving too fast," blah, blah, blah. And there's a whole thing where, Yevgeny, he talks about Boris Yeltsin, you know, how much of a disgrace Yeltsin was. You know, and again, for anybody out there who's unaware, I mean, you know, certainly Yeltsin was helped along by the CIA and the State Department, and, you know, U.S. intelligence wanted him elected. And there is this, you know, a whole part where, you know, Yevgeny is basically saying, you know, that, you know, never again. He talks about his brother dying from tuberculosis in a Yeltsin hospital in 1998. There's a, you know, Ivan says, you know, the old rules kept the world from destroying itself. And Yevgeny says, like, no, you know, that's, you know, it doesn't matter. That's your world. That's your Russia. This is my Russia. You know, and basically, that is a real and serious sentiment and opinion amongst many in Russia against, you know, amongst their political and intelligence elite. And, you know, and again, Yevgeny's fervor, is that really any different from America's? I mean, all he's saying is, no, we want to dominate the world, not the CIA. You know, and it's not that that's like better or worse or anything, but it is just a reality, you know, that the CIA in large part is a sort of, you know, dominant intelligence force kind of running much of the world. And, you know, it's not crazy to think that the Russians are like, well, we want our turn, you know. But here's an interesting thing, because to me, you know, Ivan, he represents this sort of old, you know, the Yeltsin faction, let's say, right? And obviously Ivan was involved in some of this fake news stuff, and certainly he was aware of the Slavansk operation and approved of this and whatnot. And lo and behold, BuzzFeed, you know, that wonderful reputable source, you know, an article written by the, you know, just total and utter political hack at this point, Jason Leopold. They just published an article today, you know, about Christopher Steele's other report, alleging, again, all with anonymous sources. There's no documentation, nothing, you know, secondhand information, it seems like, from FBI agents and Christopher Steele, that Putin ordered the murder of Mikhail Lesin, who was like a media czar for Vladimir Putin. Lesin founded RT, and, you know, certainly is portrayed as sort of, you know, fake news person, you know, or certainly he was pushing, you know, all sorts of crazy stuff. And he was found dead in his hotel room. And when the FBI looked into it, they said, well, he was on a bender, which he was known to do, and he fell down and busted his head several times, and that's how he died. And, you know, now lo and behold, Jason Leopold and others want us to believe that this was Putin, and by implication that Obama, I guess, covered it up because, you know, Obama is also part of, you know, the Russians are behind everything. And it's just an interesting kind of parallel, real world and Homeland, because then again, you know, what happens to Ivan? He's murdered. You know, by this new Russia, you know, that's taken it to American soil, you know, and there's this whole thing where, you know, Ivan is like, we don't do that, and Yevgeny is like, well, you know, I answer to Moscow and the rules have changed. So I don't know, maybe that's kind of a stretch, but I did find it very interesting that, again, some of these storylines in Homeland are matching up with, you know, what is obviously some sort of a propaganda push, of course, from BuzzFeed, which is just maybe the ultimate, like, they're worse than CNN with the Russiagate stuff, in my opinion.
No, there is very rarely something on BuzzFeed that I barely even look at the site these days, to be honest. But no, I remember, shortly, not to make this the stick the boot into Jason Leopold hour, but...
No, but that's fine, we can do that.
Yeah, to make it the stick the boot into Jason Leopold minute and 30 seconds, one of the first articles he wrote when he went to BuzzFeed was a piece about, you know, tenuously connecting Russian intelligence to a whole bunch of different stuff, including, and this was the part I found absolutely ridiculous, Gareth Williams, the so-called spy in a bag, this GCHQ MI6 guy who was found suffocated in a big sports holdall inside his flat, which to this day we have no real idea what on earth happened there. And yet, based, it seemed, almost entirely on anonymous intelligence sources, rather than Leopold's usual thing of getting government documents that say something through the Freedom of Information Act, he wrote in this article, somehow Gareth Williams ties into this, and he's there on the infographic, tied in, making it look like all of these different people were whacked by Russian intelligence. And now, frankly, I don't have a clue who murdered Gareth Williams, or if indeed he was murdered. It seems likely, but, you never know. Strange things do happen. So I guess it could be. You can't rule out the notion of Russian intelligence, but that was the first and only time I've ever seen that claim made. And for it to be made by a journalist who's built up this reputation as being adversarial to the government and the intelligence services, to be taking a story from those same intelligence services and pumping it out when he has no evidence for this whatsoever, seems pretty shoddy to me, and speaks to his loss of integrity in going to BuzzFeed in the first place, for one thing. I mean, I guess a job's a job. He's entitled to do that. But he's gone, like I say, from having this reputation as a true, democratic accountability adversarial journalist to being a Bob Woodward stenographer for the deep state.
Yeah.
I just thought, screw you, man. I really did.
Oh, yeah, totally.
In fact, I think that may have been what I said to him. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
We can move on from Leopold.
Yeah, because we really could talk. Yeah, if anybody wants to know my opinions on Jason Leopold, just go back in my Twitter timeline. We had
You'll find plenty of stuff. Yeah,
some words exchanged between the two of us. But now, okay, here's this is just more sort of fan Homeland stuff. What did I almost fell out of my chair when we Saul sort of insinuates that Dante is I guess SVR or some sort of, I don't know, intelligence operator. I mean, do you think Dante is?
I don't know. I mean, they haven't actually shown us anything at all that implies that that's true, except that he was the one who approached Carrie in the first place and kind of set this season's storyline in motion. But that could be happening for a number of different reasons. That could be, Dara Dahl secretly pulling the strings from prison or whatever. I mean, it's Homeland, for heaven's sake. There's lots of different reasons why Dante could not be what he says he is.
Yeah.
And only one of those reasons is that he's a Russian spy. And aside from, Carrie hasn't actually said that yet. She sort of, said, it's all making sense. The truth's kind of, emerging before my very eyes.
Right.
And she almost accuses him of it when they're having sex on the sofa.
Oh, God, yeah.
Which is, that's very hearkening back to Brody.
Oh, I guess. Classic White Widow Carrie right there.
Well, that. But also the whole, the way that she approaches the fact that he could be a Russian spy is to have an affair with him and try and get him to thereby spill the beans to her. That's exactly what she did with Brody. And it didn't end well. For anyone. Really. No. So, and actually coming back to that point, since that's the end of pretty much the end of the last episode, is that what happens is that Saul figures this out, right? They've got the ops team outside, they've got the thermoscan, and they say, I can see 3 people in there. And he sort of takes one glance at it and figures out, okay, so that's Carrie, her daughter. He says, well, she was, told to stay away, and sort of gives the order to bust the place in and go in there and drag Dante out completely naked.
I know, yeah. And all the tattoos he has.
He has a lot of tattoos, yeah. But also, I'm like, you're dragging him down this corridor? I mean, was she naked? People sort of open their door and see that, and take pictures, put it on Twitter or whatever. I mean, you're supposed to be covert operatives, aren't you? Anyway, I think, again, to return to this whole thing about Carrie and Saul being a metaphor for the CIA, in that difference between the two of them, that Carrie is doing what she's always done, right, from season 1 onwards. She represents the good CIA who sometimes do bad things, but for good reasons, right? That's what they're saying there, that she's kind of taking a stupid risk, essentially, but she's doing it because she's trying to do the right thing. She hasn't learned her lessons in the whole sense of, the CIA is supposed to learn from past mistakes and get better.
Yeah, right.
Never seem to. Saul represents the CIA learning from its past mistakes. He realizes that Carrie isn't really to be trusted, and that he's just sort of got to do what needs to be done, which is take Dante in and question him. And that this whole playing stupid games, sleeping with him, whatever, just isn't going to work anymore, and didn't work the first time anyway. Yep. So I do think there again we have this same metaphor that relates very much to the dialogue about the CIA in real life, and this dialogue that we've been having since, basically since the Bay of Pigs, to be honest, of, what's the point in the CIA? Are they actually accomplishing anything, or is it just this string of catastrophic failures that just destabilize the world and actually screw up people's interests, even America's interests in a lot of ways, and just create more and more problems? And will they ever learn from their past mistakes? This is them saying that there are people in the CIA who will. There are people like Saul, but simultaneously, I guess, in order to get stuff done, in order to have those people who will do the wrong thing for the right reason, we need a few Carries as well. And let's face it makes for, they had a good sex scene. It makes for some good drama. She's there on top of him, about to accuse him of being a Russian spy, and then bang, the door comes flying in. Bunch of guys in armor and, guns come and drag him out of there. I mean, but you know what I mean? I think there's some quite heavy metaphorical stuff going on just in that rather absurd little scene that they finished the episode with. Again, it's clever and subtle, and it's only if you're as obsessed with the CIA as we are that you'd notice these things. But subconsciously, I think people are absorbing a lot of this, because somehow the CIA is coming out of this whole Russiagate thing looking like the good guys. So
totally,
when you have to ask, okay, let's just imagine for a moment that the Russian state did do all of this, that they did hack the DNC, that they did whatever, leak Hillary Clinton's emails, whatever else they've been accused of, which is lots of different things, most of which they probably couldn't have actually done. But let's assume all of that is true. Isn't that the greatest intelligence failure in the CIA's history?
Right.
Is letting the Russians do this. And yet somehow they're coming out of this story looking, like you said, like the adults in the room. Mm-hmm. Is that not the most amazing piece of doublethink possibly in the history of the United States? And here it is in Homeland. You know what I'm saying? It's astonishing they get away with this crap.
No, absolutely. I know. No, exactly. This would constitute, a bigger failure than 9/11 in some ways.
It's not like you can't see the Russian state coming. It's Russia, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, I know.
They walk around with Russian names for...
Right. Anyway. No, I know. This is like the equivalent. I mean, imagine if like Bin Laden had elected Bush. You know what I mean? Like that's like that's what a sort of a failure this would be if it was the CIA. That's sort of an interesting thing that just sort of popped into my head when you're talking there. We might come up on the break, but we'll continue it if I get interrupted. But is again, Saul is the CIA for us, and and here we go. We have Saul, who is, at this point, just a national security advisor, okay? Yet Saul's got his own men. I love, that he's just walking around with his own thugs. I mean, who are those people that arrest Dante? We don't know. I don't believe they're like FBI or anything. It's just Saul's got guys. He's apparently the national security advisor can set up clandestine offices. I mean, he hires some dorky kid from DARPA and his former friend who was on the Russia desk at the CIA until she was ousted. And then basically blackmails Max with the threat of legal action into becoming part of this as well. Right, and then we get this ridiculous little, which is classic Homeland storyline where, Saul has to go to a judge in order to convince him that that before Simone receives immunity, and her testimony, which is going to, sell Wellington up the river, that he needs to question her. And the judge, no way, blah, blah, blah. Again, as if Saul would even have to go to a judge. Well, anyway, we are at the break right now. We'll continue this conversation in the second hour with my guest, Tom Secker. So please stay tuned.
I like very much radio. You're an American institution. American Freedom Radio.
Simply Clean Foods is dedicated to providing the best quality food you can buy next to fresh from a farmer's market. Our stringent quality controls and absolute zero GMOs plus testing for heavy metals makes us unique in the storable foods market. Our line of fruits, vegetables, and meats are suitable for everyday use, and you won't have to worry about throwing away valuable groceries ever again. Take out the amount you need and reseal the package for use within the next 6 months. Simply Clean Foods' primary focus is to bring clean food to people all around the world and change the way we look at freeze-dried food in our daily cooking. Go to simplycleanfoods.net. That's www.simplycleanfoods.net today.
This is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to American Freedom Radio.
American Survival Wholesale is a proud sponsor of the American Freedom Radio. And when you purchase quality products from AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, you help support this program. Our quality non-GMO foods do not contain MSG, high fructose corn syrup, or heavy metals. At American Survival Wholesale, you can choose from over 8,000 quality products, including self-defense weapons, bug-out bags, and long-term storable food at wholesale prices. We also have custom food packs available, including gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegetarian packs. If we don't have it, you don't need it. American Survival Wholesale is a veteran-owned and operated company which also supports our veterans in need, and we are very active in disaster relief. If you would like to become a distributor, please email us at bugoutamerica@usa.com or call 818-720-0759. We offer free consultations to answer all your questions. Do it today while things are calm. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com.
I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent a kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. I'll give you an example of that. When I was a little kid, if I got sick, they wanted me to go to the hospital and see the doctor. Now they want me to go to a health maintenance organization. Smug, greedy, well-fed white people have invented a language to conceal their sins. It's as simple as that. The CIA doesn't kill anybody anymore. They neutralize people. The government doesn't lie. It engages in disinformation. Israeli murderers are called commandos. Arab commandos are called terrorists. Contra killers are called freedom fighters. Well, if crime fighters fight crime and firefighters fight fire, what do freedom fighters fight? They never mention that part of it to us, do they? Never mention that part of it.
You're listening to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the network who perseveres in delivering intelligent debate, constructive dialogue with true independence. The freedom to broadcast the truth is not free at all. So what is American Freedom Radio worth to you? The empowering information with fun, honest and pure integrity behind it provides an example to follow. Friendships to flourish with the moral altruism that pulls no punches. The hosts sacrifice and show remarkable discipline in their duty to deliver quality radio in service to the community with strength, wisdom, and loyalty. The founders of AFR wish to thank you personally for sharing your views and insights to make the best radio and alternative media. Now it's time for you to give something back and play a vital role in the future of America. Be as generous with us as we've been with you. Click on the donate banner at AmericanFreedomRadio.com or volunteer by emailing AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Vaccine, psychotropic drugs, and artillery batteries not included.
Launch sequence initiated.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Control is good. 5, rocket copy. 3, 2, 1.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio. Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything: geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you live from New York City, your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Porkins Policy Radio. I am your host, Pierce Redmond. If you are joining us now in the second hour, we are joined by our good friend Tom Secker, and we have been discussing the sort of mid-season arc of Homeland Season 7. Lots of very interesting stuff. And before we got cut off by the commercial break there, I was talking about with one of my notes is that I love Saul's men. He's just got these, I don't know, random dude. Yeah, exactly. That, can break into people's houses and, restrain people like Max. And Saul is, for a national security advisor, is kind of like operating very much like the CIA. He's sort of just doing whatever he wants to do with virtually no oversight. I'm not even really aware if President Keane or anyone even knows what Saul is doing at the moment. But as I said, he's got his men. He's setting up secret offices. He hires this young computer whiz kid from DARPA, and also he hires a good friend of his who's she was a CIA analyst on the Russia desk, and now she's an academic teaching, college students, but she was sort of
character's name.
I can't. I can pull it up though. I think I've got the episode, the Wikipedia open, and I'll try and find it. I can't remember what the hell is her name.
Well, while you're doing that, I will just point out that she, as I sent to you a little while before we started the show, she does look an awful lot like a former CIA operative called Carol Raleigh Flynn, who featured in that notorious Sheraton Hotels cross-promotion that we spoke about a couple of years back when we were discussing Homeland. And she is also, I think, one of the bases for the Carrie character. I'm pretty sure it was her who actually showed Claire Danes around Langley when she went there back in 2010 before they even made the first season.
Right.
So I'm guessing they cast someone who looks like her, because they could have cast quite a lot of people in that role, really. I'm guessing that's a bit of deliberate casting. I could be wrong, but they do look quite similar.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think, is her name... No, I can't find it right now. There's nothing worse than listening to someone on the radio try to find something.
Maybe we'll look it up when we do the end of the season wrap-up.
Yeah. But anyway, he hires them. They're just sort of operating in some, I don't know, CIA type, some safe house somewhere, basically. Saul, kidnaps and blackmails Max. He arrests Dante. I don't believe that, as I was saying before, I don't think they're FBI or I don't know who these guys are, but they're all in all black. They've got assault rifles. Again, if you're going to arrest an FBI agent and accuse him of being a Russian mole,
particularly an FBI agent who is cooperating with a congressional inquiry,
yeah, you'd think he might need a warrant or something. But again,
didn't he go and try and get one? But the judge said no, so he did it anyway.
Right. Well, so yeah, Saul tries to get the judge to let him question Simone.
Yeah. So he just goes, "Oh, screw it. I'll just go and arrest Dante instead."
Right, and bring him to some, undisclosed location. which we see sort of trailers of for the next episode. But this to me is just sort of one of those funny little moments. Again, everything that Saul does is essentially what the CIA does. Again, no oversight, arresting people, bugging people, doing whatever they want. Again, even here on U.S. soil, I know that, the CIA will, swear on a stack of Bibles. It never does that, but obviously it does. And it's one of those funny moments too, again, where, he goes to this judge. It's like, as if he would even need to do that, first off. And also it's like, Saul, now you're going to pull out like legal. I mean, nothing you were doing was really all that legal before that. I don't believe the National Security Advisor has a legal right to do pretty much anything that Saul has been doing. And again, I mean, he's covering up the fact that Kerry and Max illegally installed surveillance equipment in David Wellington's townhouse as well. But it's just one of those. Again, it's one of those sort of interesting little nuggets that are thrown in there that I can only assume is sort of a nod to the CIA.
Well, and of course, I mean, there's that. Yeah. I think there's also, I mean, the funny thing is, what is Saul doing right now? He's doing what, up until a couple of episodes, Carrie was doing, that he admonished her for and told her off for, and kind of, threatened Max with prosecution for doing, in order to get him to do what Saul wants him to. So, hang on. What's the difference? And also, for that matter, what's the difference between what Saul is doing now and what we saw the whatever they were called, the Black Ops unit doing last season, when they were running that whole troll farm out of that basement that seems to be entirely being blamed on the Russians, even though we know it wasn't, because we saw it last season. But whatever.
Right.
Casually reboot that whole storyline halfway through this season.
I didn't even think about it. Yeah, except that was Dara Dahl.
Yeah.
That was the CIA
That was why they arrested everyone in the first place. But anyway, you know what I mean? What's the difference between what they were doing, what Carrie was doing for the first 5 episodes of this season, and what Saul is doing now? Not an awful lot, from what I can see. And so, therefore, we're left with the simple, kind of mundane message of, good Black Ops versus bad Black Ops.
Right.
That, it really is kind of that dumb, in a way, what they seem to be trying to say with that. I can't see how else you'd interpret it, because, like I say, if you sort of pick apart the contradictions and the hypocrisies and double standards there, Saul's just as bad as everyone we're supposed to have been looking on with a dubious eye for the last however many seasons. So, yeah.
And we don't all, and you stated this before, Tom, we're really not sure how real any of this is. I mean, Saul, is just sort of instantly like, this has to be the Russians, this is all fake news. Again, I know, dismissing the whole fact that, O'Keefe was working for the CIA. And, Dara Dahl was running this troll farm out, somewhere like in like an office block, in Alexandria or something. I mean, apparently we've totally forgotten about that. It's all the Russians. And, again, he also is just, who gave you this information? Dante. Oh, you just ran into him by, accident. I mean, he's like full-blown Reds under the bed. Everyone's a Russian agent at this point. And maybe he is right, but we don't really know. He is no different from Kerry. So it's an interesting, sort of idea that's being thrown out there. And I just love the idea of a national security advisor going around doing black operations.
Wearing his like mafia style overcoat and
yeah. No, I love like operational Saul. That's always like a fun Saul to see.
But no, I know what you mean, because with the whole situation at the ranch and the standoff and all of that, he was sent there by Keane, by the president. She said, go and oversee this, try and negotiate this, try and figure this thing out.
Be my advisor.
Since then, he's basically announced at one meeting of the National Security Council, we think this is the Russians. And everything he's done since then has been entirely on his own steam, without really telling anyone what he's doing or why or what he hopes to accomplish. Because you got to wonder at some point, I know, again, they're trying to do that thing like they did with Charlie Wilson's War, where they present it as, oh, it's just this small handful of CIA people or whoever who are kind of fighting against this big machine. But at some point, these active measures have to meet with countermeasures, right? Like I was saying before the break, if Russiagate is real, it's the worst CIA failure in history. So sooner or later, they have to do something to stop this, right? Because if they don't, they're almost complicit. They're certainly grossly negligent and culpable. So, I mean, where is this storyline going? Both in reality and in the show. It kind of... That's, again, one of the wonderful things about Homeland is in amongst all of these, my nitpicking over their, casual, soft rebooting of storylines in midway through a season and stuff like that. That's because that's what reality has been like in the real, news agenda, in the real news world. That's what it's been like, where these stories have been brought back in a different form. And suddenly we're supposed to forget all of that stuff they were telling us 12 months ago, because now this is the story and this is the form in which we're supposed to interpret it. So it does reflect all of that quite beautifully. I just wonder, like I say, where is all this going? Because where are the countermeasures? Where's the actual response that you'd expect to see if this was real? I don't see
absolutely.
And that makes me think, of course, it's not real. But I think in Homeland it's going to turn out it has to be. But in reality, I'm really left wondering, well, haven't they sorted this out by now? I mean, if they know all of this stuff about what the Russians supposedly did, have they not figured out a way to combat this? Or is it all just, oh, we're going to dump it on Facebook and tell them to deal with fake news or something? I mean, where's the real response?
Yeah. Why are we paying them? You know what I mean? It's like, why do our taxes go towards some of these? I mean, it's sort of like, what's the point?
If they're that useless.
Yeah, then let's just get rid of them.
If the spy satellites show no war, then what good are they?
Yeah, exactly.
To quote Chase Band.
Right. I just realized Sandy is the character, is Saul's friend, this academic.
Right. She's based on all that name is, I reckon, lifted from, what's her name, Sandra Grimes, is that it? Who co-wrote The Assets?
Yes, yeah.
Set, she ex-CIA woman who co-wrote that series. Yeah. That was the connection I was thinking of. Yeah. Sorry, I'm obsessed with these details.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's fine. Well, I was saying before I sent an email, she sort of reminded me of Connie Sachs, who's a character from Tinker Tailor, who is an expert on Soviet, she's like a Kremlinologist, and she's obsessed with Carla. So, not unlike Yevgeny, kind of. And Sandy apparently knows a lot about Yevgeny, the fake news operative. And in Tinker Tailor, of course, Connie, along with Smiley, are ousted, sort of in a kind of, as part of, it's in some ways sort of Soviets that kind of, the whole Kim Philby infiltration. What's it? Bill Hayden, right, is the character, and we're really going off topic. Anyway, Connie in that is also ousted. We find out that Sandy is ousted out of the Russia desk because of the woman whose name is escaping me now, but Saul's lover from the last season that we find out is actually a Russian agent or was compromised years and years ago, and she was trying to sort of consolidate the Berlin station. So yeah, I don't know if that's totally true, but that was what sort of it reminded me of. And I guess when you spend a lot of time watching spy fiction, everything, you start seeing connections and parallels everywhere. Tom, is anything else that you wanted to kind of touch on in terms of what we're seeing in this mid-season? Any little tidbits or things? We didn't really talk about the 4chan episode, which is sort of like almost like a one-off, like, Monster of the Week episode that really actually has almost nothing to do with anything that's happened. But it is like it is amazing that Carrie goes to 4chan in order to look for information. And at the time when that episode came, I said, oh, this is, QAnon. This is what they're sort of oddly kind of poking fun at, but also like 4chan apparently is like a place where you could go to get information. Like, I believe Carrie puts up a picture of Simone in Wellington's house and is like, can anyone identify her? So I don't know what the hell they're saying with that 4chan is crazy, but also real. I don't know.
I think that's probably, like you say, they are kind of playing on the QAnon thing and probably taking the mick a bit about people who take that so seriously. And they're also saying, you know, if you go stumbling around on these more anonymized, not exactly the dark web, but you know what I mean, things that are sort of leaning towards
the fringes of the internet,
that sooner or later you're going to run into some perverted little tosser who is going to do something nasty to you, whatever it may be. I mean, in this, it's sort of absurd, the extent that it actually goes to. But I guess maybe that has actually happened a few times. And yeah, I mean, I loved that whole storyline. I was hoping they were going to bring that guy back, the sort of hacker guy. I mean, maybe they will. Maybe he's the one who busts Daradal and Keith out of prison. But
that would be amazing.
That's not going to happen.
They become so like sort of like the A-team. You know?
Yeah. No, that really would be good. But I did like how what they're doing there, I guess, also in dramatic terms, is they're showing how Carrie's she's out on her own, and that outside of the whole kind of institutional apparatus of the CIA, or even that foundation she was working for a while, that she's quite vulnerable. And they're doing that, you know, because they want us to sympathize with the character and so on. But I did like the way that when she goes and meets the pervert in his, you know, seedy warehouse. I mean, why would he? I mean, they always live in some seedy warehouse layer. But and then she beats him up in one of the better scenes in this season.
Oh my God, yeah, so satisfying.
yeah, immensely satisfying. And she says to him, "I'm CIA, mother effer." And that is, of course, once again, a little reminder that she's CIA. She represents the CIA, both as a kind of, you know, kick-ass threat to this seedy, nasty pervert on the internet to not come after her and not do this again, but also as a little reminder to us that, you know, while she is vulnerable, she's also pretty intimidating and not someone you'd really want to mess with. And so, once again, as a metaphor for the CIA, that's kind of what they're saying to us, I guess. There's a lot of quite intelligent stuff they've somehow managed to weave into this. And as far as I can see, with very, very few critics noticing, most of the reviews and analysis I've read of this season of Homeland, they've talked about, obviously, the Russia angle and Russiagate and, you know, reflections of reality and so on. But no one seems to be twigging the fact that this is still a CIA propaganda vehicle, not just in the sense of trying to influence your worldview and your view of, you know, the conflict between the White House and the intelligence services and all of that, but also just as a bit of PR for the agency and a bit of recruitment propaganda and so on. That, you know, while I think, generally speaking, the CIA aren't that concerned with portraying themselves well, they do want to do it sometimes. They want to build in elements of that, because otherwise they would just have a sort of unremittingly negative public image. So while they are playing their usual game of not saying, oh, we're just shiny and bright and wonderful and everything we do is great, they're saying, no, we do some ugly, horrible stuff, but it's necessary and we have to do it because that's the way of the world. They are also saying, you know, we're quite tough and intimidating and not to be messed with, and that if you do, you'll end up with a broken leg on the floor of your warehouse layer. I guess.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's so funny. This is almost like a new approach in terms of what I can only assume is the CIA's entertainment liaison office when it comes to the way they're portrayed, because you know, we've talked about this time and time again, Tom. I mean, there are movies where the CIA is portrayed positively or negatively, but as ultimately a force for good, or to show them as sort of funny and bumbling, like Meet the Parents and stuff. There are movies where clearly the CIA is just sort of entirely deleted from the conversation. But this season of Homeland is so fascinating because essentially the CIA has been airbrushed out. I mean, they are nowhere in sight. They're not even mentioned. I honestly can't recall if maybe they say the agency, but I don't think there's been any overt name dropping of the CIA.
Well, of course. Remember at that National Security Council meeting where Saul says this is the Russians, someone says, "Oh right, we're blaming this on Russia now." I'm pretty sure that guy was a general. He sat there in a military outfit. Mm-hmm. Where is the director of the CIA in that conversation? Because they're a member of the National, of course they're on the National Security Council.
Totally.
They should be at that meeting, but no, it's Saul running things. It's him doing all of the intelligence stuff. So we can assume that this administration has abolished the CIA and just subsumed it all under Saul, and he's... that seems to be the implication.
Totally. No, and this is so fascinating because it's like they've airbrushed the CIA out, yet essentially they are there. They are omnipresent, if not, overtly. Clearly, all of these actions this is the CIA, again, because it's Saul and Carrie. This is what they're doing. So I don't know, it is a fascinating approach to inserting themselves into a television show because, of course, ultimately, at the end of the day, as we've both been saying, most viewers are going to leave this with the impression that the CIA is good. That they are actively trying to stop, these active measures, on behalf of Putin and the other members of the political and intelligence establishment in Russia. Even though, they're, like you said, it's sort of like, shouldn't they have already kind of been on top of this? It's just sort of like, what were you doing during the election if the Russians were hacking it, or any of these other active measures going on? Where was the CIA?
Well, and in the most recent episode, when they've now tied in the whole oligarchs thing, and they're saying that this foundation that Simone runs is like laundering money for the Russian oligarchs, and they just it's just a throwaway line. Oh, obviously they're all in bed with Putin, and that's it. It's like, well, have you actually established that, or is that just an assumption that we're supposed to make, that any powerful Russian is automatically hand in glove with the Russian state? Because at the same time, we're supposed to believe that quite a lot of these powerful Russians were murdered on the orders of Putin. So,
no, that's the whole thing. They're all Russian oligarchs are evil until they get murdered by Putin. And then suddenly they're heroes, and they deserve like a state funeral, in Washington D.C.
They're martyrs to the new Cold War or whatever. Yeah,
no, it's like this guy Mikhail Lesin. Now, okay, it's horror. If he was murdered in this hotel in D.C., that's a bad thing. You know what I mean? People shouldn't go around murdering people. But
sure.
I'm sorry. What the hell is the analysis here? He's an evil Russian oligarch who helped found RT, okay, and push all sorts of propaganda, worked hand in glove with Putin, and then, according to BuzzFeed and Michael Steele, we're meant to believe that Lesin somehow fell out of favor with Putin. Therefore, he is now a good guy, and Putin murdering him is evil. I don't quite know the sort of mental gymnastics. It's sort of the same thing like with Skripal. The guy was a Russian double agent. He's I'm sorry. That's a nasty job. Why am I shedding a tear over this guy? It's kind of even the same with like Litvinenko or any of these people. In a lot of this BuzzFeed article from Russia with blood. A lot of these people that were being killed. It's like, yeah, well, they were intelligence operatives or Russian oligarchs who were evil. Again, it's like that weird sort of like some billionaires are good. We can make a lot of hay about how evil they are and how they're going to do all this, but there are some billionaires that are good. There are some Russian oligarchs that are actually good guys, even though, again, Lesin is supposed to be a good guy while he was, apparently, drinking himself to an early grave in his $40 million yacht called Serenity, filled with, Siberian models and God only knows what else. Who cares if Putin whacked him? You know what I mean? I'm sorry, but it doesn't really bother me.
It doesn't have a huge amount of consequence for anything else, does it?
No, I mean it's like
one more dead rich guy, really.
Yeah, it's like mafia guys killing each other. Like, does it really affect me? You know, I mean, it's sort of like that is sort of their line of business. You know, I mean, this is again, you don't get involved in intelligence if you don't think that there's a possibility that this could happen.
No, sure. And you have to say, again, let's assume that all of these different allegations of these dead people they were all murdered by the Russian state. Well, they didn't kill any innocent bystanders. They did it quite efficiently. You have to have a certain, if all of that's true, then you have a certain admiration for their tradecraft, quite frankly. But, I mean, not that I think all of these stories are true. Maybe some of them were, some of them weren't. I mean, I don't know. I'm certainly not an expert in those sorts of things. Although I will say, again, to bring this back to what we're saying about the kind of absurd double standards and the mental gymnastics necessary to believe this crap, is that probably the thing that did the most damage to the government's story about Skripal poisoning, that whole thing, was not the massive problems with the claims that they were making. It was that Boris Johnson was confronted on TV with all these stories about Russian oligarchs paying lots of money to the Tory party so that they could attend events and have tennis matches. You know, so they would have Boris Johnson would have a tennis match with this guy's wife and nonsense like that. And that's where the hypocrisy sort of hit people. That they realized, the Tories couldn't care less about Russia. That's not what this is about. This is a political tactic, this story, this series of claims and allegations. I mean, I don't know who poisoned that guy or what he was poisoned with or where it came from. I don't think the government do either. So that's why they came out with a story that was convenient for them politically, that's now fallen apart. But it wasn't the absence of fact in the story they were selling that made it fall apart. It was the underlying hypocrisy. And it seems that that's what some people, at least, will actually respond to. And I guess that's kind of a good sign that even with all of this kind of fake news on all sides, and even with all of the absurd contradictions and doublethink inherent in this entire conversation, that people can still kind of recognize hypocrisy when they see it, and that it does make them disbelieve the hypocrites. So maybe there's some hope for the human race, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, let's hope so. But and just quickly on the Skripal thing, it's funny too that I don't know if you saw this, but like in Intel News reported it, but that his friend said that Skripal wrote a letter to Putin saying he wanted to return. Which is just I have no idea if that's true. I kind of doubt it. But again, it's just like, so what's going on here? So if that's true, is Skripal evil again? He just went from being he was evil when he worked for the Russians. Then he was a good, British hero when he defected to MI6. He's now a godlike figure because he was murdered. But if this is true, well, then he must be evil again.
Yeah, but the problem with that then is
who killed him.
I mean, he's not quite dead yet, but I mean.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I don't think those two are recovering, to be honest.
No, I don't.
They're horrible. Yeah, it does then just reopen that whole line of questioning. Is that, hang on, if that story is true, that he was trying to redouble, or possibly redouble again, because he may have switched sides multiple times throughout this story, then that would automatically suggest, well, it was the other side that whacked him, which would mean MI6, CIA, Mossad, maybe, someone of that stripe,
sure.
At least. Anyway, I mean, we don't really know who, but I'm just thinking who would have access to that kind of nerve agent. And those are the three most obvious suspects. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if that story undergoes a massive reversal at some point, because it seems to be kind of fading, but just about still has its claws into the news agenda a bit sometimes. So it's probably going to be like the Litvinenko thing. It's sort of going to go on forever, endlessly, without any real solid answers, and lots of people making claims and counterclaims. And I mean, wasn't it Litvinenko's father said that he thought he was whacked by the CIA? And now I don't know whether Litvinenko's father is in a position to know that sort of thing, but it shows that he understands the world his son was moving in. And if he gets it, then we should get it.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, again, it's par for the course. I really don't know of very many, prominent spies like that had, just a natural, they just died at home with their loved ones. It instantly reminds me of William Colby. I mean, what the hell happened to him on that boat? You know what I mean? And again, that's sort of even admitted in mainstream media. They don't really know, or that there's always been rumors. It's like, yeah, because he was a U.S. spy master. Of course, his death alone on a boat is never going to look, that's normal.
Or John Paisley, the CIA liaison to the Watergate burglars, and that whole thing, who ends up supposedly shooting himself using the wrong hand, out on a boat somewhere in the Chesapeake Bay. His body washes up, several days later. It's apparently several inches too short, although that then gets changed in the coroner's report. You get into these things and you really do start to wonder, well, how many of these spies really have ended up even being killed by their own side because they know something that they don't trust this person to keep a secret anymore? Or, these people are kind of paranoid by nature. So the notion of people killing people even on their own side, so even if it ultimately turns out that Skripal was just still MI6, that doesn't rule out MI6 as a suspect. So by the same token, doesn't rule out the Russians as a suspect, even if it turns out he was trying to return and become SVR or FSB or whatever again. Yeah. Because you never know. So that's the problem with these things. And while Homeland does a much, much, much better job than most of encompassing that sophistication, in a few points in this season so far, the cracks are starting to show and the agenda is becoming a little bit simplistic and beating you over the head. If you have eyes to see it, like you say, most people won't look at the show in that way because it's a piece of entertainment. They're just caught up in the drama and the complexity and what's going to happen next and who's really doing what. Yeah. But I think they absorb it anyway, or some of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it does sort of like leak in, and again, that's why you and I are so obsessed with the show. Tom, quickly, any other last little things? I love that Dante drinks Tito's vodka. Nice shout out to Tito's, in his house. And I also love Beau Bridges. The great Beau Bridges is President Keene's vice president, and I do hope he returns because he's amazing. I love everything he does. He's my favorite of the Bridges brothers. And anyone that watched Masters of Sex, he's in that and is fantastic. But any other little things you wanted to mention before we sort of wrap up?
I did really like the scene where Keene was at the whatever it was Navy ceremony. And she reads the letter from Wellington, and it's like the first letter where he's just announces that he's going to resign, and then she starts flicking through this other rambling 3-page letter, and it's full of stuff about, Russian spies, but she meant nothing to me, and he's kind of saying, the only reason why I came back is that I'm still in love with you, and yes. I found all that. I hope they do something with that, because frankly, this president needs another character element than a president under siege. She's playing that quite well, but it's a bit one-dimensional. It doesn't give her a lot of room, and I think she's a pretty good actress. We saw that in the previous season. She's someone who can handle a bigger character than she's really being given. So I hope they bring... I hope Wellington doesn't go, and I hope he does actually start having an affair with the president, because...
hasn't he?
Well, they did in the past, it seems.
Okay.
But they aren't currently, because he ran off and accidentally got hooked up with a Russian spy. Right. I like the Keene character in as much as...
I'm really warming up to Keene, actually. I thought that this last episode 7, really kind of made me kind of begin to really kind of feel for her, and it again, I know it's like, oh, boo-hoo, it sucks to be the president, but she does a great job of showing how, like, isolating it is. Especially for someone like her. She doesn't have a husband. Her son is dead. And, that's, I guess, not normal, in terms of presidents. But even so, even if you did have a wife and kids and loving family, I think it is a really isolating job. And there's a really some really sad kind of emotional moments where, she's reading this thing and it's like, you can tell she is sort of in love with David Wellington. And to be in a position like that where it's like, how do you date someone if you're the president? You know what I mean? Or how do you
explored in that film, The American President, and it's actually quite an interesting film because of that. It's quite, I guess, in some ways realistic. That's probably I know it's kind of heightened for drama. It's an Aaron Sorkin script, but nonetheless, that's sort of the kind of conflicts that you'd actually have in reality. And so that's why I kind of think they should go in that direction with this. It would, it kind of flesh out the White House beyond just being this thing that's kind of under siege from unknown forces while Saul runs around running the country. Because much as I love watching that, and I kind of think Saul should be running the country out of any of these Muppets. They need somewhere else to go with that. I'd much rather see more of that and less of Carrie going a bit mental and having trouble with Franny, who at this point is basically just a piece of ginger-haired luggage.
So she's horrible. She's not good for operations.
She certainly isn't that. No.
Although, again, Carrie, just Mother of the Year award, using her daughter for operate. You know what I mean? She, uses that to get back into Dante's house. She takes her to interview Dante's ex-wife. Seriously though,
then proceeds to have sex with the Russian agent on his couch with her child asleep in the room just next door, which then gets busted up by the SWAT team, leading to her child becoming traumatized. She's a fantastic parent deep down.
I know. I really
they should just. It's horrible, but they should kill that character off because it's not making anything good for the show, and it's taking up room that could be spent on other better possible storylines.
I know. Her sister should just get custody of Franny, and then that's the end of it.
Yeah, that would work for me. I can live with that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, because it's also like Carrie doesn't even really care about Franny. If she did, then she probably would just be like, you should stay with my sister. Anyway, though, we're beating up on poor old Carrie, who again, we should note, I guess, is like off the lithium, and is basically just popping Adderall, all the time. So that's going to make anyone a little edgy, so to give Carrie her due. But Tom, thank you so much for joining us for this mid-season Homeland review. We, of course, will do a final episode on this in a few weeks' time when Homeland ends. I believe the last episode will be on Sunday, April 29th. So we'll have another episode probably that Tuesday. A lot, I think, is going to happen in the next 5 or 6 episodes, or no, 5 episodes, I think. Any kind of last minute predictions you want to throw out there?
Well, I've already said it. They need to have some kind of Prison Break spin-off thing with Daradal and O'Keefe. That if that happens, then this probably will become my favorite season. And I'm not kidding. I actually, as absurd as Homeland sometimes is, I kind of enjoy some of the absurdity because it leavens what's otherwise a somewhat depressing show at times, or at least a gritty, challenging, awkward show that makes you feel a little bit hollow sometimes. So, if they can incorporate, they've got to bring back O'Keefe in some format. Yeah. I don't know what's happened to Daradal and whether he's even going to be in this season, but O'Keefe has to come back because he's too good. They would be wasting the character if they don't find a way to write him back in. So that, aside from that, I haven't really got a clue where this is going.
No, nor do I. And I have a feeling that there's going to be there's got to be some bigger twist. I don't think it's just going to be the Russians because Homeland never really does that. There's got to be something, or there's got to at least be like one more secret Russian mole that we don't know about yet. That will be revealed at a later date. And I believe they actually Alex Gansa hinted at that they will actually go to Russia in this season. I think towards the end. like in the I think in the last 2 episodes or something like that, they might actually be in Russia, which will be really fun and fascinating to see because we've never been there in Homeland before. And it's one of those weird things, you know, they in spy dramas, you know, they're never in Russia. You know, it's always like a proxy country. You know, they could be in Germany or Syria or you know,
sure. From Russia with Love mostly takes place in Turkey.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, exactly. You know, they're rarely ever, you know, I'm thinking Salt, they never go to Russia, right? Only in flashbacks and stuff like that. Yet that's obviously the whole premise of the movie. Anyway, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. And please do remind the listeners where they can go to check out your podcast and all of your writing, where they can go to support you. And also we should just plug that we're going to be recording tomorrow for my bonus podcast. And we're going to be talking about Cambridge Analytica, which kind of ties into everything that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, it certainly does. So, yeah, I mean, people should sign up to Pierce's Patreon or sign up to my Patreon if they want to get that episode, because I'm pretty sure we'll put it out on both.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, my site, spyculture.com, if you want to read some documents about, you know, government involvement in Hollywood, then that's probably the best place in the world that you can go to do that. But yeah, I do the podcast Clandestine, so if you want to hear more of me and Pierce talking about various different things, and also just generally speaking, if you want to hear more of my perspective on Russiagate, Cambridge Analytica, Al-Qaeda, all sorts of different things that I cover on that podcast. So, yeah, please go and check that out. And if you want to support me, yeah, please sign up to the Patreon or get a copy of the book, National Security Cinema.
Excellent. Yeah, and of course, I highly encourage everyone to go out and support Tom, and definitely buy National Security Cinema and check out all of Tom's work. But Tom Secker, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll be talking to you, I know, again soon, but and definitely tomorrow for the bonus podcast. But thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Pierce, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Excellent. Well, once again, everyone, Tom Secker of spyculture.com. You can support Tom by going to his Patreon, which is patreon.com/Tom Secker. And really fun. I always try my best. I think this might be a record right now of getting Tom to stay on the line. You know, usually he wants to wrap up after a half an hour, but you know, we were able to squeeze almost 45 minutes out of Tom, so that's always good. But as I was saying there, we're going to be recording tomorrow on Cambridge Analytica. So again, if you want to support my work and you want to hear that episode, then you should go to patreon.com/Pierce Redmond, and you can sign up for the low price of $1 a month. And you know, I guess sort of in anticipation of this bonus podcast, if you haven't seen the Channel 4 investigative series of interviews and stuff that they've done on Cambridge Analytica, I certainly encourage you to go out and watch them. It's very interesting report from Channel 4. A lot of it I had some serious problems with, and Tom and I will certainly be getting into that for tomorrow's episode. You know, mainly one of my big problems is this purple-haired whistleblower, and I say whistleblower in air quotes, who is featured prominently in the first episode, or the first part of the Channel 4 documentary, and he's sort of becoming a bit of a media celebrity in the past couple of weeks, and we'll definitely kind of touch on why that is and why I think that's a problem. But really interesting stuff there. Alex Nix, of course, the head of Cambridge Analytica, who's he's a leave of absence, really fascinating character, and just the way that the media has sort of covered this story is so interesting. And again, we'll get into all of that. I don't want to tease out too much of it, but some really kind of fascinating and big questions are being raised, about Cambridge Analytica, about the power of these sort of private, what essentially, at least the way that they like Nix and others have sort of been describing it, it's sort of like a little private intelligence organization. will, I guess if the price is right, do whatever you want done. And I think there's even some kind of debate as to the validity of some of those claims. But we're going to be covering that, so that'll be a very fun episode. And quickly, I just wanted to also plug a couple of interesting upcoming shows. I'm going to be doing a show, I believe it's next week, with Joseph L. Flatley, who's a writer and a filmmaker who I've known for a little while now. I think I met Joseph might have been almost about a year ago. And he contacted me, and Joseph, he's written for The Verge, Pando Daily, Counterpunch. He's some of his short films have been. He was at the Non-Plus Festival in Los Angeles and the Three Rivers Film Festival in Pittsburgh, which is where Joseph is. But Joseph just published his first novel, which is an amazing looking cover. I'll post a picture later on Twitter of it. But the name of the novel is Sirhan, or the Hallucinatory Vanguard, and it's really a really fun, amazing little novel. It's I got the book in my hands right now. It's fairly short. It's like 213 pages, I think. But it's sort of, I don't even really want to. I guess I'll read a little bit off the back, and hopefully this will sort of get people interested. But this is the back description of the book. Sturgis Sturdivant is a professional troll. He works for a fake news website. He can't seem to find a decent therapist or meet a nice girl, and it looks like he's inadvertently joined a cult. If that wasn't bad enough, Stu might be a hypnotically programmed assassin. Sirhan, or the Hallucinatory Vanguard, is 2 parts neo-noir, 1 part satire. The reader will encounter media startup yuppies, conspiracy theorists, ravers, and political extremists of all types in a book that doesn't comment on contemporary culture so much as wallow in it. And, it's really is a great book. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm almost done with it right now, about like halfway through. And it is laugh out loud funny. Believe me, Joseph is very well versed in the conspiracy culture, and this is certainly a critique at times of the conspiracy culture. And you can also just tell that Joseph has a real sort of deep knowledge of conspiracy topics. It's obviously Sirhan. Sirhan is name dropped in the title, and he it does sort of feature in the book in some ways. And it's great, but we're going to be interviewing Joseph, next Tuesday, April 3rd, all about the book. And I definitely encourage people to go and check it out, especially too, it's a book I think that the listeners out there would really, really enjoy. It's funny. It's very sharp. There's a wonderful kind of story structure to the book. I don't want to give away too much, but, it sort of starts off 30 years into the future, and there is this retired general. I believe he's a general, but worked in like military intelligence or something. And he's giving he's like at a conspiracy conference, and he's giving a talk on MK Ultra, mind control, assassins and stuff. And it sort of jumps, he's not featured all that prominent, it sort of jumps back and forth. And then it jumps to Stu, who's our main character, this guy who works for, this, sort of right wing, sort of like a mixture of like BuzzFeed and Breitbart, sort of. That's like the kind of site that he works for. And it's sort of about, we see, the sort of story about, how Stu gets involved with some sort of very interesting characters. And then every once in a while it kind of jumps, back to the future, into the future, during this conference that is ultimately talking about Stu and what Stu does, which I don't even know. And Joseph is wonderful at kind of building. You're not sure what's going on, who's involved. But yeah, really, really fun book. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And I think, Joseph will also be on, Chuck's show and Ed's show, and I think Tom is also going to have him on. So, that'll be a really fun episode to look forward to. I'm also doing, finally going to be doing, an episode, with Brian Heiss talking about the, assassination of, Gianni Versace, the FX show. that is all about the Kinanan murders and the murder of Versace in particular. So I think that'll probably be sometime. I think it might be the 10th of April is when we're doing that. And then I also very excited. I'm going to have on a journalist who I have admired for a long, long time, Judy Revere, who is a Canadian journalist who mainly focuses on Central Africa, Congo, Rwanda, the Great Lakes area, and she's written extensively on Paul Kagame and the RPF, and mainly, she's a great critic of Kagame and the RPF and the war crimes that were committed by this basically Tutsi death squads during the genocide in the 90s, and she's also a great critic of Kagame right now. And Judy has she's written a lot for the Globe and Mail in Canada about this, but she has a new book called In Praise of Blood, The Crimes of the Rwandan Patriotic Front. And I was lucky enough to get an advance copy. I don't believe the book is out right now in the U.S. I think it might be out in Canada. But Judy sent me a copy of the book, and I can't wait to get into that. But that's going to be a really fun episode. I know people really like the Keith Harmon Snow episode, where we talk about Congo and Rwanda and the genocide and stuff. And Judy is really quite an expert on all of that stuff. So that's going to be a really fun episode. And I believe Judy is probably banned from entering Rwanda, because she's such a prominent critic of Kagame and has done a lot of deep research. I tweeted an article that was an excerpt from In Praise of Blood recently, which was about I think it was Giti, which was a town or a little village in Rwanda that there's this sort of mythology around the village that it was the only village that didn't. I think there were a Hutu village that didn't sell out the Tutsis, and it's a complete lie. And the RPF actually went in there and murdered all of the Hutus, and then kind of covered it up and created this whole myth around this particular village. And they elevated the mayor of this town. He eventually became a member of parliament, and really interesting stuff. So definitely check out Judy Revere. Revere, I don't know. She's I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, and I'll have to have Judy tell me how to pronounce it. She's French Canadian. My French accent is pretty miserable. But anyway, lots of really fun stuff coming up on the horizon. Those episodes. I will be away. Just as a little matter of housekeeping, I'll be away for about 2 weeks in the last week, or the second to last week in April, and the last week in April, the first week in May. I will be gone. I'm going on vacation. And people might have heard Tom talking about it, but Tom, Secker, and I are actually going to be meeting up while I'm on vacation. So very excited about that. And maybe we'll, I was thinking of, Tom and I are going to be hanging out a bit in Ireland. And I was thinking, of, maybe just like recording our, bar conversation or something like that. And maybe making that into a little bonus podcast or something like that. I doubt we're really going to do that. And I don't know if people really want to hear, what Tom and I are going to be talking about in the bar, but very excited about all of that. So I will be gone. But I think I'll actually have, some new episodes to play, while I'm away. So, don't worry. There will still be some content. You won't have to hear a repeat, or an old archived episode. I should have some new content up. And again, too, if you didn't hear, I'm also going to be starting the new podcast series with John Atack over at the Open Minds Foundation. And the first episode of that should also be coming out in April before I leave. So definitely, look out for that. And, again, I'll be pleading with you over over at Open Minds, but please do spread the word about that, because the Open Minds Foundation is a wonderful organization. Very excited to be working with them. So if you like the shows that I do with John A. Tech, I think you're really going to like the series that we're doing over there. But it's enough plugging, I guess, of all of my stuff. I did have there was some interesting little stuff. I mean, I probably should have led in with that and then plugged. Oh, but anyway, I don't even have to ramble anymore, because we are at the break, at the end of the show. So thank you all so much for listening. Again, if you want to support my work, go to patreon.com/Pierce Redmond, and also please click on the donate button at AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And until then, I will be talking to you very soon.
No rules, no taboo topics, no fear of doom, We are American Freedom Radio.
Simply Clean Foods is dedicated to providing the best quality food you can buy next to fresh from a farmer's market. Our stringent quality controls and absolute zero GMOs plus testing for heavy metals makes us unique in the storable foods market. Our line of fruits, vegetables, and meats are suitable for everyday use, and you won't have to worry about throwing away valuable groceries ever again. Take out the amount you need and reseal the package for use within the next 6 months. Simply Clean Foods' primary focus is to bring clean food to people all around the world and change the way we look at freeze-dried food in our daily cooking. Go to simplycleanfoods.net. That's www.simplycleanfoods.net today.
This is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to American Freedom Radio.
American Survival Wholesale is a proud sponsor of the American Freedom Radio. And when you purchase quality products from AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, you help support this program. Our quality non-GMO foods do not contain MSG, high fructose corn syrup, or heavy metals. At American Survival Wholesale, you can choose from over 8,000 quality products, including self-defense weapons, bug-out bags, and long-term storable food at wholesale prices. We also have custom food packs available, including gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegetarian packs. If we don't have it, you don't need it. American Survival Wholesale is a veteran-owned and operated company which also supports our veterans in need, and we are very active in disaster relief. If you would like to become a distributor, please email us at bugoutamerica@usa.com or call 818-720-0759. We offer free consultations to answer all your questions. Do it today while things are calm. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com.
Assassination. You know what's interesting about assassination? Well, not only does it change those popularity polls in a big hurry, but it's also interesting to notice who it is we assassinate. Do you ever notice who it is? Stop to think of who it is we kill. It's always people who've told us to live together in harmony and try to love one another. Jesus, Gandhi, Lincoln, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, John Lennon. They all said, try to live together peacefully. Bam! Right in the head. Apparently we're not ready for that. Yeah, that's difficult behavior for us. We're too busy sitting around trying to think up ways to kill each other. Here's one we came up with. It's efficient, too. Genocide, you know? Killing large numbers of people simply because they don't look like you, they don't talk like you, and they don't have the same kind of hats you do. You ever notice that anytime you see two groups of people who really hate each other, chances are good they're wearing different kind of hats. Keep an eye on that. It might be important.
You're listening to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the network who perseveres in delivering intelligent debate, constructive dialogue with true independence. The freedom to broadcast the truth is not free at all. So what is American Freedom Radio worth to you? The empowering information with fun, honest and pure integrity behind it provides an example to follow. friendships to flourish with the moral altruism that pulls no punches. The hosts sacrifice and show remarkable discipline in their duty to deliver quality radio in service to the community with strength, wisdom, and loyalty. The founders of AFR wish to thank you personally for sharing your views and insights to make the best radio and alternative media. Now it's time for you to give something back and play a vital role in the future of America. Be as generous with us as we've been with you. Click on the donate banner at AmericanFreedomRadio.com or volunteer by emailing AmericanFreedomRadio@ymail.com. Vaccine, psychotropic drugs, and artillery batteries not included.
Launch sequence initiated.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Control is good. 5, roger, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio.